I didn't plan for it to start that night. We were standing on the patio of my brother's house, glasses of cheap champagne sweating in our hands. A small backyard party, 20 close friends, cousins we barely spoke to, neighbors we pretended to like. I tapped my glass with a fork, made some stupid joke about growing older, and then, because it felt important, I raised my voice and said, "Today marks 24 years and 6 months since we tied the knot." Laughter, clinking glasses, someone whistling. I saw her across the deck, that perfect fake smile she wore like makeup. She didn't even wait for the laughter to die down. She threw her voice over the crowd, sharp like a thrown knife. "No, it's 25 years. The people around us laughed again, thinking it was some cute marital argument. But my voice was steady when I answered. I didn't even raise it. "No, honey," I said, letting the words breathe between us. "Our marriage ended 6 months ago, the day you cheated on me." A silence swallowed the party whole. The DJ fumbled the playlist. The heat of a dozen stares pinned her to the wooden deck like an insect on a board. For half a second, she was frozen. Then her face twisted into something I hadn't seen before, not regret, not shame, but rage. She stormed inside, and I followed, my heart calm, my hands loose at my sides, as if my body knew before my mind did that this night had to happen. The living room was empty, save for a few scattered purses and coats. She turned to face me, her eyes flashing. "You just humiliated me in front of everyone," she hissed, setting her glass down so hard it cracked. I stepped closer, close enough to smell her expensive perfume, the one she never wore for me, only for someone else. "You humiliated yourself," I said. "You just didn't think you'd get caught." She laughed, an ugly, humorless sound. "You're pathetic," she said, digging through my messages like some insecure little boy. "No real man would have to check." I shrugged. A real wife wouldn't give him a reason to. Her mouth opened, closed. She looked around, desperate for something to grab onto. An excuse, a lie, a version of reality where she wasn't the villain. It was one night. She finally snapped. "One stupid mistake. You're really going to throw away everything over something that meant nothing?" The words hit harder than a slap. Nothing. That's what I was to her. 24 years and 6 months of life, memories, sacrifices, and it was nothing. I walked to the front door, opened it wide, feeling the cold night air against my skin. "Leave," I said quietly, "before I start telling them more." She stared at me, jaw clenched, fists trembling. But she left, slamming the door so hard behind her that a picture frame fell from the wall. The glass didn't shatter completely, just cracked. I picked up the frame, stared at the photo. Us at the Grand Canyon, me with my arm around her, her head tilted against mine. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the party dying outside, my mind sinking into a deep, silent place. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was empty. But that emptiness? It was better than being lied to. And it was only the beginning. The house emptied faster than a sinking ship. Word travels fast when there's blood in the water, even if it's just metaphorical. Friends who had once toasted our anniversary whispered hurried goodbyes, pretending to be concerned, but their eyes glittered with the thrill of fresh gossip. By the time I walked back onto the deck, only my brother, Mark, and his wife, Allison, lingered awkwardly by the folding chairs, pretending to pick up empty cups. Mark caught my eye and gave me a look. Not pity, not judgment, just a nod, like two soldiers in a trench acknowledging the blast. "You good?" he asked, voice low. "I'm fine," I said. It was a lie, but it was the only answer that mattered right then. Natalie's car was gone from the driveway. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could actually breathe. Not the shallow, tight-chested gasps I'd gotten used to, but real, full breaths that filled my lungs to bursting. I stood there, the cool air gnawing at my skin, watching the taillights vanish down the street in my mind, over and over, like a burned image on film. Inside, I found her phone on the kitchen counter. Unlocked. Abandoned. It was almost too easy. I should have left it alone. Should have respected some invisible moral line. But after what she'd done, morality wasn't even in the same room. The messages were all still there. Some guy named Ryan. Not saved under Ryan though. Saved under Rita's nail salon. Cute. I scrolled. Dozens of texts. Photos. Her in the dress I bought her for our anniversary dinner. Her in the lingerie she said she felt too tired to wear for me. Phrases that still hum like static in my head. You make me feel alive again. Wish he wasn't home tonight. Counting the hours until I see you. The dates lined up too perfectly. The business trips. The late meetings. The I'm just having wine with the girls nights. It wasn't an affair. It was a second life. Mark hovered in the doorway watching me, not saying a word. He saw the screen over my shoulder and didn't even try to pretend he hadn't. You gonna tell her you found that? He asked after a long moment. I locked the phone and set it down with a deliberate kind of calm. No, I said. She already knows what she is. Now it's my turn. He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room, the only light coming from the dying embers in the fireplace, turning her phone over and over in my hand like a loaded coin. Somewhere around 3 a.m., my front door rattled. A key turned. She walked in, heels clicking, hair messy, eyes wild. No apologies. No shame. Just anger, raw and stupid and ready to ignite. You think you're so smart, she spat. Humiliating me like that? In front of everyone? Do you think you're going to come out of this looking like the hero? I stood slowly, the chair groaning under me. The silence stretched, pulled taut like a noose. I don't need to be the hero, I said. I just need to stop being your fool. Her laugh cracked the air. Oh, please. You think everyone's gonna side with you? You're boring. Predictable. A safe little puppy. You think that's what women want forever? I took a step toward her. Maybe not. But they don't want a liar either. She smirked, tossing her purse onto the floor like it weighed 100 pounds. You don't get to play the victim, Kyle. If you were half the man you pretended to be, maybe I wouldn't have looked somewhere else. It wasn't the words that got me. It was the way she said them. Carelessly. Like throwing trash out a window. She didn't stumble. She didn't backtrack. She believed it. And in that moment, something in me snapped so cleanly I almost heard it. I wasn't going to fight for her. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I simply picked up her phone, opened the door, and tossed it into the night. She screamed, darting after it, her designer shoes skidding on the wet porch. I closed the door behind her, locked it, turned off the lights. And this time, when I sat back down, the silence wasn't heavy. It was holy. Morning came without warning. No slow drift of sunlight, no cozy yawn and stretch. Just the brutal slap of reality peeling my eyelids open. The first thing I saw was her car, still sitting crooked at the bottom of the driveway. The driver's door hanging open like she'd abandoned ship mid-disaster. No sign of her. For a moment, a ridiculous thought crossed my mind. Maybe she'd finally realized what she threw away. Maybe she'd be curled up on the porch, mascara streaked, begging for forgiveness. But the porch was empty, and forgiveness was bankrupt. I brewed coffee I barely tasted and watched the street through the kitchen window. Neighborhood joggers passed, kids on bikes swerved around her car like it was a corpse no one wanted to deal with. The house felt too clean, too sterile, like she had already been scrubbed from it, leaving only the memory of the mess she made. At 9:42 a.m. she came back. Not alone. A silver Lexus pulled up, engine purring like some smug animal. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, smug in the way only a man who thinks he's invincible can be. Ryan. No handshake. No hesitation. He walked around the car, opened the passenger door for her like some cheap movie villain, and there she was, sunglasses perched on her head, hair tossed carelessly over her shoulder, a smug little smile playing on her lips. I didn't move from the window. Didn't breathe. Watched. She grabbed a duffel bag from the back seat and tossed it to the ground, laughing at something he said. He leaned in, touched her waist. She didn't flinch. She leaned back into him like they had done this 100 times before. Like our house, our life, was just another cheap motel in their road trip. The doorbell rang. Sharp. Impatient. I opened the door slowly, already knowing what was on the other side. Hey, she said, shifting her weight from one hip to the other. Not embarrassed. Not even sheepish. Like she was here to pick up dry cleaning, not to collect the ruins of our life. I'm just here for some things, she said brightly, like we were old college friends instead of two people she had set fire to. Take what you want, I said, stepping aside. She brushed past me, perfume swirling, completely unbothered. Ryan stayed by the car, arms folded, surveying the scene like a king watching peasants scurry. I followed her through the house in silence, watching her pluck things off shelves, toss clothes into a bag, pocket jewelry, check herself in the mirror. No hesitation. No flicker of regret. You're really just letting me? She said finally, tossing a handful of makeup into her purse without looking at me. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. The kind you give when you know something the other person doesn't. Every thief eventually leaves with less than they stole, I said. You'll figure that out. She laughed again. A short, cruel sound. You always loved your little speeches. She zipped the duffel shut with a sharp, angry yank. Ryan's waiting. I don't have time for this. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough that she had to lean in. Make sure you grab the right bag, I said softly. Would be a shame if you accidentally picked up the one with the copies of your little text messages. Or the ones I sent to your boss. Her face blanched. For the first time since the whole thing exploded, she faltered. A tiny crack in the perfect porcelain. You're bluffing, she snapped. I didn't blink. Hope Ryan's ready to support you, babe, I said. Because once your boss reads about all those after-hours meetings you build to company cards, you're gonna need a lot more than a new boyfriend. The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, closed. Ryan honked the horn impatiently outside. Without another word, she grabbed her bag, yanked the door open, and stumbled back toward the Lexus. I watched her go. Didn't wave. Didn't call out. Just watched as she climbed into the car, slammed the door, and disappeared down the street for good. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I smiled without faking it. I thought it would end there. She took her bag, drove off with Ryan, and I stood in the echo of it all, thinking that was it. Clean break. Sharp cut. But the thing about fire? It never stays in one place. The first spark landed 2 days later when I got the email. Subject line, formal termination notice. At first, I thought it was spam. A phishing scam. But it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to her. And somehow accidentally they claimed they sent it to both her work email and our shared personal account. I read it twice, 3 times, letting every word settle. Termination. Immediate. Violation of company ethics policy. Investigation pending for potential criminal charges related to misuse of corporate funds. It took everything I had not to laugh out loud. The lies, the late nights, the working late texts, they hadn't just cost me my marriage. They had cost her everything. Later that afternoon, she called. Blocked number. Of course. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. She didn't leave a message. 10 minutes later, another call. Blocked again. And again. By the 5th call, I answered not out of kindness, but curiosity. You happy now? Her voice burst out before I could even speak. You got what you wanted. You destroyed my career. I leaned back in the kitchen chair, phone on speaker, savoring every word like a rare wine. I didn't destroy anything, I said. You just stopped hiding it from everyone else. You sent them the screenshots. I know it was you. Her voice was high, panicked, not the cold, polished version of her that Ryan got to see. This was the real her. The ugly, clawing version that hid behind perfect makeup and pretty lies. I didn't send anything, I said truthfully. The truth was better. I had left her unlocked phone on the kitchen counter that night of the party, right where Allison, Mark's wife, had picked it up looking for a charger. I didn't have to expose Natalie. She did it herself by being careless. You're a bitter, petty little man, she hissed. You'll die alone, you know that? I almost said something then. Almost stooped to her level. But instead, I ended the call with a simple click. No words. No emotion. Just silence. Later that night, I found a package on my porch. No return address. Inside, a crumpled envelope with my name scrawled across it in a handwriting I knew too well. And a stack of photos. Photos of Natalie and Ryan. At hotels. At restaurants. In cars. Time-stamped. Dated. Proof more brutal than anything I could have imagined. There was no note. No explanation. Just the cold, hard images of a life that had been lived behind my back. At the bottom of the stack was a receipt. A florist's receipt. 12 dozen roses delivered to her office, not from me but from Ryan, dated 6 months ago to the day. The day she'd come home smiling, humming a song she said she heard on the radio, claiming she was in such a good mood because of a successful meeting. The rage didn't come this time. The heartbreak didn't either. Just a strange, numb sort of wonder. How many lies had I swallowed because I loved the person telling them? I packed the photos back into the envelope, set it down on the counter, and made myself a drink. Something strong. Something final. The war wasn't over. But it was no longer mine to fight. 3 days later, just as I started believing the storm had finally passed, she came back. Not alone. Not with Ryan either. This time she brought her mother. I heard the knock first, sharp, deliberate, the kind of knock that demands you answer whether you want to or not. When I opened the door, her mother, Linda, barged in without a word, face twisted into that same pinched, self-righteous sneer I had seen too many times at too many Thanksgivings. Natalie followed behind her like a puppet with cut strings. No fire, no venom, just exhaustion. I stayed silent, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting. Linda started talking immediately, a rapid-fire assault I barely tracked at first. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said. "You're overreacting. Natalie made mistakes, sure, but what marriage doesn't have problems? Are you really going to throw away 25 years over a stupid fling? A stupid fling." There it was again, that acid little phrase, stripping the gravity out of betrayal like it was a parking ticket. Natalie kept her head down, pretending to rummage through her purse. I let Linda rant, let her lay out the case like a bad defense lawyer at a losing trial. Forgiveness. Family. Mistakes. Fresh starts. "You owe it to yourselves," she said, her voice sharpening, "to at least try." I waited until she ran out of breath. Then I turned to Natalie. "You sent her," I said, not asking, just stating. Natalie finally looked up at me, and for the first time, there was something real flickering in her eyes. Not love. Not regret. Fear. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You don't get to hide behind your mother," I said. "Not this time." Linda sputtered something behind me. I didn't hear it. I was locked on Natalie. "You want to stay married?" I said. "Then tell her." "Tell her how many times?" "Tell her where?" "Tell her what you called him when you thought I wasn't watching." Natalie's mouth worked soundlessly, her hands twisting in the strap of her bag. "You can't," I said, stepping back. "Because if you start, you'll never stop. It'll all come pouring out, and she'll see you for what you are." Linda caught on finally, her face paling. "Natalie?" she said, voice small. "What's he talking about?" Natalie shook her head wildly. "Nothing. He's lying. He's trying to turn you against me." But it was too late. The panic in her voice, the cracks in her act, it was all there, naked and ugly, impossible to hide now. Linda turned to me, her voice brittle. "You're kicking her out?" I didn't even blink. "She's not welcome here," I said. "Not her. Not her lies. Not her problems." Natalie's face collapsed into fury. "You think you're so perfect," she screamed. "You think you're some saint just because you didn't get caught doing anything wrong." I smiled, not kindly. "That's the difference between us," I said. "I didn't have anything to hide." Linda grabbed her daughter's arm, trying to steer her toward the door, but Natalie shook her off violently, rounding on me one last time. "You're going to regret this," she spat. "You're going to wake up alone and realize you lost the best thing that ever happened to you." The words hung in the air like smoke. I shrugged. "I'd rather wake up alone," I said, "than next to a stranger pretending to love me." Linda yanked Natalie toward the door, dragging her daughter's tantrum out onto the porch. I didn't watch them leave. I just closed the door and locked it. This time, the sound of the lock sliding home didn't feel like defeat. It felt like freedom. But just as I turned away, my phone buzzed on the counter. A new message. From an unknown number. One line, "You think you know everything. You don't." I stared at it, heart slowing, mind sharpening into cold, precise focus. The game wasn't over. It was just changing. And I wasn't playing defense anymore. The message burned in my mind long after the screen went dark. "You think you know everything. You don't." 16 words, and every one of them was a spark on dry wood. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the living room, the envelope of photos still resting on the coffee table, the phone beside it, waiting for a second message that never came. Morning hit hard and fast. I showered, shaved, dressed like I had somewhere important to be even if I didn't. There was a war coming. I could feel it in my bones. At 10:14 a.m., the second message came. A photo. Blurry but unmistakable. Natalie sitting at a cafe. Not with Ryan. With another man. Older. Dressed sharp in a suit and tie. Leaning in close, smiling the way men do when they think they're winning something they have no right to. The caption was simple: ask her about David. My stomach didn't twist this time. It hardened. Another secret. Another life she had tucked away neatly while feeding me half-truths and bedtime kisses. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out the old laptop from the bottom drawer of my desk, the one she never touched because it was too slow. I dug through old emails, old receipts, old bank statements. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was building until now. And there it was. Transactions flagged under consulting fees. Wire transfers. Private account numbers I didn't recognize. It wasn't just cheating. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. From us. From everything we built together. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Meet me tonight. 8 p.m., corner of Willow and 7th. Come alone. No name. No signature. But I already knew who it was. Who else would bait me like that? I spent the day moving through the house, touching things that suddenly felt different. The wedding photo that once sat proudly on the mantel now looked like a monument to someone else's lie. The painting we bought on our honeymoon in New Orleans now felt like it belonged to strangers. At 7:50 p.m. I pulled into a spot down the street from Willow and 7th. It was a dead zone. Old warehouses, empty parking lots, flickering streetlights. I killed the engine and waited, the air inside the car so thick it felt solid. At exactly 8 p.m. a figure stepped out of the shadows. It wasn't Ryan. It wasn't David. It wasn't even Natalie. It was Allison, Mark's wife. The one who picked up Natalie's phone that night at the party. She slipped into the passenger seat like she'd done it 100 times, pulling her hood back to reveal tired, haunted eyes. I didn't know how else to get you to listen, she said quickly, voice low and sharp. They're planning something. You're not safe. I stared at her, every muscle in my body tensing. What are you talking about? I asked. Allison looked around nervously, then shoved a flash drive into my hand. Everything you need to know is on there, she said. But you need to be ready. Natalie's not done with you. Ryan's just the distraction. David's the real problem. And you? I asked, not trusting anyone at this point. She smiled grimly. I'm the idiot who thought staying quiet would protect me. Before I could ask anything else, she slipped out of the car, disappearing back into the dark like she was never there. I sat there gripping the flash drive so hard my knuckles ached. At that moment, one thing became clear. Natalie hadn't just betrayed me for love, or for lust, or even for greed. There was something bigger, darker. And whatever it was, it had already begun. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I sat there in the dark, flash drive burning a hole in my palm, the city breathing around me like some living, watching thing. The temptation to plug it in immediately was unbearable. But instinct screamed louder. Home wasn't safe anymore. Nothing familiar was. So I drove across town to a grimy little internet cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation, paid cash, and sat down at a battered computer at the back of the room. I plugged in the flash drive. No folder names, just files. Hundreds of them. Bank statements, emails, photos, voice recordings. I opened the first recording at random, heart hammering. Natalie's voice filled the cheap plastic headphones, sharp and cold. He's too passive to notice. By the time he figures it out, it'll be over. A man's voice answered, not Ryan's. Older, more controlled. You promised results. We need the account numbers, the passwords. Otherwise, he's just dead weight. My blood ran ice cold. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about infidelity anymore. It was a setup. A long, slow, professional one. I scrolled through emails, scanning dates, times. She hadn't just been planning a life without me, she'd been helping these people strip mine our savings, our investments, everything we had ever built together. One email stood out, bolded, never opened. From Natalie to David. He still thinks we're fixing things. Idiot. He'll sign anything I put in front of him if I cry hard enough. Attached, a scanned copy of a power of attorney form. My signature already forged. I leaned back hard, the chair groaning under the weight of what I had just seen. This wasn't betrayal. This was demolition. They wanted to ruin me. Completely. Legally. Financially. Personally. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But I did. Hello? Silence. Then a voice, slick, oily, amused. You're smarter than I thought, David said. No introduction. No small talk. You should have taken the loss like a man, he continued. Now you're just making it ugly. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. What do you want? He laughed, low and mocking. I already have what I want. This little act of yours? It's just delaying the inevitable. You think you can fight us? You're one man, Kyle. One. I gripped the phone tighter. You made one mistake, I said quietly. And what's that? He sneered. You thought I was still the man she lied to. Silence. Dead, thick silence. Then he hung up. I pulled the flash drive out of the computer, pocketed it, and walked back to my car under the flickering streetlights, heart pounding but head clear for the first time in weeks. This wasn't about saving my marriage anymore. This wasn't about heartbreak. It was survival. And I was done playing nice. When I pulled into my driveway just before midnight, a familiar shape was waiting for me. Natalie. Sitting on the steps, knees pulled to her chest, face pale under the porch light. She stood as I approached, mascara smudged, hair tangled, clutching a folder to her chest like a shield. Kyle, she said, voice trembling, you don't understand, I didn't slow down. Didn't answer. Just opened the door and stood aside. You have 5 minutes, I said. She looked at me, desperation flickering in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. They forced me. I didn't have a choice. Wrong, I said coldly. You made one. Every single time. Tears welled in her eyes, real ones, maybe, but it didn't matter. It was too late for that. She handed me the folder with shaking hands. Inside, documents. Account numbers. Evidence. Everything. A kill switch. My life's in there too, she said. If they find out I gave this to you. I looked up at her, my voice flat. Not my problem. She sagged against the wall, defeated. I'm not the monster you think I am, she whispered. I laughed low, humorless. No, I said. You're worse. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. This time, no hesitation. No second chances. And on the other side of the door, Natalie finally broke down. A soft, choking sound that meant nothing to me anymore. She wasn't my wife. Not really. Not anymore. And the real war was only beginning. The folder Natalie handed me wasn't just evidence. It was ammunition. I spent the next 12 hours dissecting every piece inside. Forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, confidential communications between David and his network of bottom feeders. Timelines carefully mapped out to drain me dry before leaving me legally ruined. They thought they were dealing with the old me, the man who would bend, compromise, forgive. They weren't ready for the man they had created. At noon, I made my first move. I called Mark. He answered on the second ring, voice tight. You ready? He asked without pleasantries. I'm ready. We met at a rundown diner just outside city limits. The kind of place where no one asked questions and the coffee tasted like burnt rubber. He slid into the booth across from me, eyes dark, serious. You're not the only one they burned, he said. They tried to pull Allison in too. Threats, bribes, promises. I nodded, pushing the flash drive across the table. Time to burn them back. Mark grinned. Not the easy, brotherly grin I remembered, but something sharper, meaner. About time. We spent the next 4 hours coordinating everything. Copies of the evidence sent to multiple trusted contacts. An anonymous tip submitted to federal investigators. Bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. Natalie's part was undeniable. She wasn't just an accessory. She was a co-conspirator. And then there was Ryan, not just her lover but David's enforcer, a man with a sealed juvenile record full of things that could end political careers if the right people saw it. By the time the sun dipped behind the horizon, the trap was set. The first domino fell that night at exactly 6:43 p.m. An email from Natalie's former company leaked to the press allegations of financial misconduct, citing an internal whistleblower and supporting documentation. 2 minutes later, the local news picked it up. 5 minutes after that, David's consulting firm's website went offline. By 7 p.m., my phone exploded with calls from unknown numbers, reporters, investigators, lawyers. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened a fresh bottle of scotch, poured a single glass, and waited. At 7:29 p.m., my front door shook under a series of violent bangs. I opened it slowly. Ryan. Not smooth, polished Ryan from the Lexus. Not cocky, smirking Ryan from the porch. This Ryan was wild-eyed, sweating, barely holding himself together. You think this is over? He barked, shoving a finger into my chest. You think you're safe? I smiled calmly, holding his gaze without blinking. It's not about being safe, I said. It's about you being exposed. His face twisted with rage. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Then he saw the 2 patrol cars pulling into the driveway behind him, lights off but unmistakable. Ryan stepped back, panic flashing across his face. You set me up, he hissed. No, I said, stepping back into the house, letting the cold night air creep past me. You set yourself up. I just turned on the lights. The cops approached quietly but purposefully. Ryan backed away, muttering curses under his breath before trying to bolt. They tackled him in the front yard, knees in the dirt, hands cuffed behind his back. Natalie was next. I knew it. I didn't feel joy watching Ryan hauled off in the back of a squad car. Didn't feel vindicated. Only a grim, hollow satisfaction. Justice wasn't pretty. It was necessary. I closed the door behind me and locked it, the sound sharp, final. In the quiet that followed, I sat back down at the kitchen table, staring at the remaining stack of documents. David was still out there. Natalie too. But they weren't hunting me anymore. I was hunting them. And I was just getting started. The morning after Ryan's arrest, I woke up to a world already shifting under my feet. Articles flooding the local news. Arrests, investigations, names dragged through headlines like bodies through the mud. David's empire wasn't just crumbling. It was imploding. By noon, 3 different lawyers had called, offering assistance if I wanted to mitigate the damage Natalie had caused. I didn't want mitigation. I wanted annihilation. At 1:03 p.m., Natalie showed up again. No warning. No shame. She pounded on the front door until I opened it, standing there in ripped jeans and an oversized sweatshirt, looking for the first time like the liar she truly was. Stripped of her armor, her polish, her fake dignity. Please, she said, voice raw, almost broken. Let me explain. I said nothing, just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting for whatever new brand of poison she planned to sell. Tears spilled from her eyes, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. You don't know what he threatened me with, she whispered. You don't know what he made me do. I raised an eyebrow. He forced you into hotel rooms? Forced you to fake a marriage while planning to gut our accounts? Her mouth opened, closed. She had no defense. I thought I could control it, she said finally, voice trembling. At first, it was just dinners. Meetings. But then, David said if I didn't help, he'd come after my family. I watched her carefully. There was fear there, yes, but not fear for me. Fear for herself. He used me, she whispered. And when he was done, he threw me to Ryan. The words tumbled out faster now, desperate like a drowning woman trying to lighten her load. Ryan was supposed to keep me in line. Make sure I didn't back out. I never meant to hurt you. I swear, Kyle. For a moment, just a sliver of a second, I wondered if any of it could be true. If maybe she had been a pawn trapped deeper than she realized. Then I remembered the emails. The photos. The laughs she shared with Ryan. The way she looked at me after I found out, not with regret, but with contempt. You chose this, I said, voice low, steady. You could have come to me. You could have told the truth. She sagged against the doorframe, broken, defeated. I have nothing left, she said. Please, don't let them destroy me. I almost pitied her. Almost. But pity was a currency she'd already bankrupted. You destroyed yourself, I said. She looked up at me, mascara smudged down her cheeks, face twisted in something between rage and grief. If you do this, she said, voice rising, you're no better than they are. I laughed quietly. A cold sound. The sound of a man who had already buried everything he used to feel. I'm not trying to be better, I said. I'm trying to finish this. She stood there a moment longer, trembling, then turned and staggered back down the steps. No car waiting this time. No white knight to rescue her. Just the cold, hard world she helped create. And me, standing at the threshold, watching it all crumble around her. I closed the door softly behind her. No slamming, no yelling, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who had finally learned the one truth no one ever wants to say out loud. Sometimes the best revenge is letting them drown themselves. But the final move, that was still mine to make. And David, the real architect of all of this, didn't know it yet. He thought Natalie was the weak link. He thought Ryan was the problem. He never saw me coming. The final move had to be clean. No screaming, no chaos, just precision. I spent the next 2 days preparing, double-checking every document, every email, every piece of evidence Allison had uncovered. Natalie had burned her bridges. Ryan was in custody. Now it was David's turn to fall. It wasn't enough to destroy him legally. I wanted him exposed, fully, publicly, irreversibly. At 7 p.m. on a Friday evening, I arrived at the Grandwood Hotel downtown, dressed in a simple black jacket, jeans, boots, nothing fancy, nothing memorable. The lobby buzzed with the usual hum of weekend travelers and tired business executives. David was hosting a private investment opportunity meeting in the top-floor conference room. His last desperate attempt to pull in money before the walls caved in. I walked straight past security. My name wasn't on the guest list, but when you look like you belong, people don't ask. The conference room was sleek, expensive, a room for making promises you never intend to keep. David stood at the head of a long mahogany table, charming, confident, still wearing the smugness of a man who thought he was untouchable. Until he saw me. His smile flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. I moved to the side of the room, silent, invisible, blending in as he droned on about offshore accounts, new ventures, high returns. I waited until he was too deep into the lie to pull back. And then I struck. One by one, I handed out copies of the evidence. To every attendee. Silently. No words. Just truth laid out cold and bare. Pages of embezzlement. Fraud. Conspiracy. Faces around the table shifted, confusion first, then disbelief, then anger. Phones came out, cameras flashed. David stuttered, stumbled, tried to regain control. But the tide had already turned. I caught his eye across the room. No words needed. This was my revenge, not fists, not yelling, exposure. Ruination. Security rushed in too late. David tried to shout something, orders, threats, but no one listened anymore. As I was escorted out, I caught a final glimpse of him, face white, hands trembling, the great illusion shattered at last. Outside, the city was alive, indifferent, uncaring, beautiful in its apathy. I didn't go home. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was something inside me now, rebuilt brick by brick, without her lies weighing it down. Natalie's number called once, twice that night. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I drove down to the coast, parked by the cliffs, and stood watching the dark waves devour the shore. Not thinking. Not mourning. Just standing. Alive. Free. 24 years and 6 months to build a life. 6 months to watch it rot. 1 week to burn it all to the ground. I wasn't the man she married anymore. I was the man her betrayal had carved out of the wreckage. And if there's anything I learned from all of it, it's that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are.